he was experiencing was little hiccups in the power band, and I'll show you why. This sounds ridiculous! What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode on Proven Power Cycles. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Eric and I am the tuner here at Proven Power Cycles. And today we are starting off with a 2018 Kawasaki H2 SX. So kind of a little bit background story on this one. He's got a full exhaust system. I think he said it was like a Scorpion style exhaust system. It's not super common, but he's got an exhaust on it. He's got a mail-in flash, and he's having some issues with the drivability mapping, which is kind of, honestly, it's kind of common what I see in our world. A lot of tuners don't really mess with drivability. They like to do more acceleration mapping. So heavy acceleration and full throttle stuff is typically what I see. Not everybody, not everybody, but a lot of times I see that quite often with a lot of dyno tuning operators is they like to do that. So they kind of do half the work, if you will, or a third of it. Drivability mapping is a pain in the ass and it takes time, so I could see why people skip it. But anyway, we're gonna double check it today. That's what we got going on. We're also gonna make sure that everything else is okay, like his fueling system, ignition system, things like that. So we're gonna just double check and make sure that everything looks okay. All right, guys, so we've been working on this 2018 H2 SX here. So what we've come to, we talked to the customer a little bit. We kind of explained everything, the process as to how to fix the issue that he's having. So overall, the mail-in flash that he received is actually a pretty damn good mail-in flash. But what he was experiencing was little hiccups in the power band, and I'll show you why. And this is kind of a common thing with the mail-in ECU flashes. So the customer was complaining about a low end to mid-range, specifically from around 4K to 7K range, he said, where the bike would kind of hesitate a little bit at light throttle, all right? And not all the time, but typically when I hear that it has a mail-in flash, or if it has a full exhaust, with an high flow air filter, things like that. Whenever I hear these keywords, those are the things that usually make me go, it sounds like it's probably gonna be something to do with either you got an exhaust installed and you didn't get it tuned, or who knows, maybe the tune isn't accurate. Maybe it wasn't a good mail-in flash and the map didn't work for your bike, right? Which happens actually kind of often. So anyway, got it on the dyno, and exactly what he was feeling is what we're seeing on the dyno. So he said specifically in between roughly 4K in on the bike, which really it's closer to about the 5K range, but 5K to 7K, he said it had some hesitations to it. And look at our AFRs right around that time period. So these are partial throttle pulls, like 10%, 20% range style pull, or actually anywhere from about 5%, about 10%, and then this one was about 15% up here, and then we had a 20% one, but the 20% one was actually fairly close, and I'll show that here in a second. But look at the light throttle stuff from 5 to 7K roughly. Look how lean we go in all of our partial throttle settings. So we're dealing with 14 to 15, look, 14 to 15, 15.2 AFRs. You know, we're extremely lean, 14.2, 13.7-ish. You know, we're very, very lean considering that this is a forced inducted bike. So whenever you have forced induction going on and you're trying to build boost, as you're building boost, you're adding more air to the system. So when it's running lean and you have an excess air, because now you have excess air running through the motor, you're kind of, it's the issues that you normally feel on an NA motor versus this, they're a little bit more exasperated. They're a little bit more noticeable because of the fact that, you know, it's trying to go under boost. It needs the fuel even more so than a regular naturally aspirated bike. So it needs a lot more fuel than what it's seeing. So I kind of explained this to the customer and I let them know. And even this is like, you know, again, like 10 to 15% throttle. And look, we're seeing 13.7s all the way, yeah, 13.7 all the way up to 9,300 and on, you know, and on up. So 13.6 at, you know, 10,000 RPM. So, and this isn't a guy that's beating on the bike, you know, he's primarily cruising, and I'm assuming does anywhere from about 10 to about 50, 60% throttle. So, you know, he's not racing this bike, it's a touring bike. So he's just trying to go out there and enjoy it and wants a very smooth partial throttle map. So I explained all of this to him, and he opted to go ahead and actually just get it dyno tuned. I did give him that option that he could go back and deal with the company that he was originally dealing with and basically send them this chart and tell them what you need fixed, you know. But yeah, you got to dig your ECU out of this bike, and it's a pain in the ass. For those of you who don't know where the ECU is on these bikes, the ECU is up over here behind this fairing, but it doesn't sound, it's not as easy as it sounds. So what you have to do is basically remove pretty much the whole front end. You can cheat the system by trying to trying to take the bolts out of the cage, but let me tell you something, to do it the right way, the front end and the side fairings need to come off. It's a pain in the ass, it's time consuming. And then you have to route a wire from, basically you have to route a new harness so that we could tap into the ECU. We have to route that wire from the front of the bike all the way to the tail section back here. So here's the wire that we ran all the way up to the front of the bike, underneath all the fairings and everything, and then we tap into the KDS plug as well. So, and this is how we flash the ECU. So, and then we're on a Molex connector and goes to the interface. Now what I'm in the middle of is I'm getting ready to, I've already put a new flash in it. We're gonna start rerunning the bike and we're gonna start dialing it in. We did get a full throttle pull. It does have a restrictor in it, a silencer in the exhaust that we just removed. So that's another factor to keep in mind, because he dynoed a little low. But he did have this silencer in there, and it's a very, very, very small opening right here. It's about 1.5 inches roughly. So very tight opening, we took that out. So we're gonna retune it without any silencers in it. And that should help also bring more power to the bike, which, you know, it made about 200 horsepower or so with that silencer in it. You know, you really don't need too much more than that on a bike like this, but we're gonna see what it makes anyways, regardless. So and then we're gonna clean up the chain and sprocket for them and wipe the bike down and do our normal touch on the bikes. So, but anyway, guys, let's get this thing fired up. I got it warmed up again, and I wanted to catch this video. And even though I should be leaving right now. Actually, it's about 6:30 or so, but I'm staying late to film this for you guys. So here we go. Let's see what it does real quick. Alright guys, so we finally got that H2 SX all wrapped up. This bike is a monster. And let me tell you something, if you do not know what these bikes are when you're riding on the road, you're gonna be blown away at how fast these things can get down. So I'm sure this guy surprises the hell out of a lot of people already as it was. Now, I wanted to recap everything really quickly. So the main goal on this particular bike wasn't necessarily heavier throttle settings, because he already had a mail-in flash, and quite honestly the flash was pretty good, you know. It just had a couple of little areas in partial throttle that are really difficult to hit when you're dealing with a mail-in flash. So anyway, we took over basically the tune, and we've completely retuned the bike. Now he also had a silencer in the exhaust, which also sometimes a lot of the mail-in stuff, they don't, unless they're asking for that information from you, they don't know that you have that in the pipe. So that will affect your tune big time. So with that being said, keep that in your mind while we go through these numbers, okay? Okay, so with that being said, we still wanted to do a comparison just to kind of show you guys what the gains were on a full throttle basis. And here's another benefit of having the actual custom dyno tune. we can monitor when boost is really coming in, so we can play with the AFRs and the ignition timing a little bit more. So with that being said, we were able to run a little bit leaner of an AFR down in the lower RPMs while we're building boost. So it gives them a little bit better drivability, a little bit smoother of a drivability, and we'll look at all those here in a second as well. If you notice here, AFR is very similar to the mail-in flash, which, you know, it is a good flash, like we said. The only other difference was with that silencer out, you know, clearly we were able to pick up power across the power band. We picked up about 12 wheel horsepower, but we were also to be able to throw a little bit more ignition timing at it with that silencer being out. Now we could push this bike even harder, we really can. It ended at 214 wheel with 97 foot-pounds of torque. But we're not going to, just because again, the guy's not out here trying to race it or anything like that. But we can. You see this little dip down here? We have a slight dip here, and it has some little dips here and there all the way up to red line. That's indicating that we have the ability to add a little bit more ignition timing, but this customer does not have an intercooler. You know, it's basically a stock bike. The exhaust is a little bit on the restrictive side considering how much power this thing makes. So again, I don't want to add it. I don't want to stress that motor out even more so, given that we don't really have all the proper parts to really push this bike to make that power consistently, where I would feel confident that, hey, you can go out here, ride on the highway and just do pull after pull, and this thing's gonna be, you know, for the most part, okay. You still need to give it some cool downs, still need to use common sense, but all in all, again, just want to let you guys know there is a little bit more room in there. We could probably get this thing up into the 220s, 230s if you had the right setup and with us pushing it a little harder. But with that being said, I'm still very happy with that. Here's the other graphs I actually wanted to show you guys to kind of show you the difference. It's a little difficult, but this is to show you the difference between those partial throttle pulls where you're steady on the throttle versus kind of how it was when he first came in here. So this is a somewhat decent comparison, okay? Now notice the red line is now the new tune, okay? The red line is the newer tune. If you look here, we're literally the difference of 1 horsepower. Well, major difference, because of the spike here. There's a major difference in torque because of that spike. It's reading that spike, which is just kind of like a glitch. But notice before, this is roughly, if I had to take a wild guess, maybe 5% throttle or so. You know, we're talking about very minimal values here. This is more like a cruising speed. So notice here, our torque and our horsepower is on a downward curve, similar to here. But now look at this portion here. See how it just kind of falls on its face and it's like, and then it picks back up here, right around the 5,500 RPM. This was his major complaint, was, remember, anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000, right? So this was one part of the throttle mapping that we hit where it fell on its face and then it picked itself back up, which this is gonna make for a crazy ride. This is gonna be like, you're losing power and torque, so the bike's kind of falling on its face and then it's picking back up again. So it falls on its face, then picks back up in speed. Almost, you know, this is again within this is within 700 RPM. So it's a very kind of abrupt like hit and then pull. So, and notice our AFRs, see how they get very, very lean, and they stay very, very lean throughout that whole pull up until about 7K. And now look what happens at 7,000. Notice the power band and everything picks back up and it starts to pull. So that's part of the supercharger kicking in, but it's also because AFR got in a good little range. So notice how here we have a nice steady right around the 14.0 AFR, and then we kind of enriching it a little bit more, and then as we're coming into boost, you notice how now I have the AFR dipping off. So that is going to make for that steady, smooth look. This is the torque curve here. So you notice how smooth and how flat more or less that torque curve is. Now as you pull up in the RPM, it's gonna kind of fall off, and if I would have held this curve to 7K, it would have started to pull back up. Kind of like this curve, it would have started to follow that curve. It would have started to pull back up because the supercharger and the boost would have kicked in. So this was, I mainly wanted to show you the drivability, more or less, the difference in the drivability and how this interpolates to a smoother pull versus this power loss and then re-engagement. So it's a little hard to describe stuff like that, honestly. It's hard to show this kind of stuff because it's really difficult to hit the exact same throttle percentage every single time. So that's more or less kind of how you see the partial throttle mapping, at least what he was complaining about in particular. So, and again, we did tell him that you're more than welcome to mail it off, and you know, it's a pain in the butt getting to the ECUs and everything. So he was like, nah, screw that, just redo it. So we did. Hopefully he loves it. So with all that being said, guys, I think it came out great. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much. If you could, give us please a like and a follow. Leave a comment down below. Tell us what you think of this video. Leave us some feedback about the video. Tell us what you'd like to see on bikes like this in the future. Tell us if we missed something that you guys wish you could have seen. Let us know. Give us some feedback, guys. We love you guys. Be safe out there. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you. All right, peace.